Yo, JD here, Tyrrell Lewis, and as you can see, back on F1 2020 as always, and we are back once again with some league racing, this time at TSRL round 4 at Monza, aka the Temple of Speed. And just to give you a bit of a catch up on how the championship has gone so far, you should see the standings on the screen now. First 3 rounds have been up and down a little bit. Silverstone was definitely a big disappointment for me. Just didn't hook up the qualifying lap when it counted. And USA, a bit unlucky I'd say that we had a disconnect, but a nice recovery in the end. And then Bahrain Short, we got some decent points on the board, but it has been LCR Leopard who has been the man on form in this championship. And for the first time in TSRL, we've usually been leading the championship from start to finish. Now we have something to chase. And before we continue, I would like to say a massive thank you to BOTB for sponsoring this video. BOTB are the Dream Car competition company who give away 2 cars every single week in their Dream Car and Midweek Car competitions. As well as lowering all of their ticket prices as of recently, they've added £50,000 to every single car in the Dream competition and £20,000 to the Midweek Car competition. There's over 150 cars to choose from, and you can see they're not just your normal cars. They are incredibly luxurious, incredibly OP, and I think anyone would love to own one of these cars. So they've been going over for 20 years. 38 million in prizes have been won by participants, and the winners get first year's insurance free and servicing, and anyone over 17 can play. So if you're interested in entering this competition for literally a price of a cup of coffee, then check out the link down below. Many thanks to them. And now let's continue with the video. And arriving here, as you can see, we were next to Perondi in Q1. It's going to be definitely an uphill battle, but I'm really looking forward to the challenge. And arriving at this track, I felt pretty good considering I did the Esports Challenger Series around here, came 6th in that race, and it was a mixture of dry and wet conditions. So having that experience under my belt definitely gave me a little bit of confidence entering this circuit, which I know is not a favourite among many of the drivers. And it's a circuit where you have to actually manage tyre wear, but also the track invalidations. It's a really big problem. So we're currently sitting in the top 5, I think, in this championship. Plenty of races still to go here, but I was looking to definitely get back on terms with LCR Leopard in the hunt to try and claim my 3rd TSRL title. And you can see here in Q1 we got through with just the 1 lap in the end on the softs, because I didn't feel I needed to really go out again. I didn't want to risk using another set because I don't always trust the weather in the garage, especially after a Silverstone race that I did recently. And for the rest of the session, it is projected to be intermediate conditions, and I feel quite good in the wet on this game. So I was actually quite happy with this, because it also means you can start on the preferred medium tyre for the start of this race, because the alternate strategy, as we've seen at many other circuits, is very powerful. But at the moment we are focusing on the qualifying. This is Q2, and this is the best lap I did in the Q2, and I don't go out again after I complete this lap because I felt very confident that this would be enough to get through. But it was also a big confidence boost going into the Q3, where I'm able to save another 2 fresh sets of the inter tyre. So on this lap, it's been a very big improvement, because track evolution in these conditions, in my opinion, is actually much stronger than it is in the dry, as we do a 27.2, and you can see quite satisfied with that. And towards the end of the session, that was enough for P4, comfortably through, more than a half a second margin. And you can see the guys up ahead, they did slightly faster laps in the end, but I felt good that the track was always going to be quite a bit quicker towards the end of the session. So we're into Q3 now, And I felt like I had a great chance of even getting the pole position. And a lot of my league races recently, I just haven't hooked up the qualifying, and I just haven't hooked up the entire race. Despite feeling like I've been driving very well, I just need to put it all together. And I feel if I do that, then I definitely have the speed to be winning races. And that's what I need to be doing if I want to get myself back in this championship hunt. So, you can see here, this is my penultimate lap in the session. CRG Smasher, we just kept on trading positions in here, and I kept on always going back into P2. But now this is going to be the final lap, because he went double purple in that last sector. So it's mainly the first sector where I can gain the most amount of time. And looking at the timer, this isn't a particularly optimal time to start a lap. It would have been good if you leave it to the last possible moment, because the track is slowly starting to dry, although I don't think it's going to be quite dry enough for the actual slick tyres themselves. You can see here on this first sector we are improving, but very fractionally, and actually as I say that, we've actually gone down negative into the delta, so not a particularly good lap so far. So we're really going to have to pull it out in this last part of sector 2 and the final sector itself. And it's crucial that we don't invalidate either, because the track is improving so much. Go through to it, no purple sectors on this lap, but doing the Scary pretty nice and cleanly with a good speed. And we're about almost exactly a tenth up going into the final corner of Parabolica, and we're still currently P2. But at the time I felt like this wouldn't be enough to be near the front of the grid, as coming across the line, CRG Smasher does a 26-0. We do a 26-5. A purple last sector in the end, but
GG, how the earth is
we weren't able to get close to Smasher. And to be honest, the setup I'm using is very good for the dry conditions, and it's a setup that I feel has got a very good balance to it when the tyres go off, because around this track, that is one of the key elements that I feel a lot of people overlook, is the stability of the car, because that will enable you to be as consistent as possible. And also I'm going for straight line speed in here, so I'm using 1.6 for the race, as now we have 4 lights, 5 lights here, enough for the front row. Let's see what we can do as the lights now go out, trying to get as good start as I possibly can. I actually get a very good launch, but SHZ Dominic gets an absolutely incredible start. Going into turn 1 is going to be free abreast, going to Smasher turns in. We go on the inside of the cup. Luckily, we did not get damage from that, and Dominic is able to get past us as a result. We try and maybe do a drag race into turn 3, but thinking a little bit better of it, and
Smasher just never leaves any room.
You'll just hear me say Smasher doesn't leave any room. Very easy to say when you're in the race, but looking at it rationally afterwards, I can confirm there was really nothing he could do, because he had Dominic to his left, me on his inside. I didn't want to back out of it because I didn't want to lose any more positions to the likes of Antoine or Ronhard behind. But thankfully, we managed to get through that corner unscathed in the end. And as the race goes on, we're going on to lap 4. Smasher is trying to pull away. I can confirm he's using 2.6 wings as well, so he's got a lot of downforce. And we have all elected to start on the medium tyre, because it is a much more powerful strategy than the soft to medium. And of course, Q2 being wet, everyone effectively had a free tyre choice for the start of this race. But we have to be careful, because we are actually slowly losing the DRS to Dominic up ahead and almost losing the car on the exit of Scary. That has absolutely killed the momentum going down the straight, and now Antoine is right behind. And I was very anxious not to let him pass, because I felt like he had the fastest speed out of everyone in this race in the dry conditions. Mainly because he won the F1 Esports Challengers round here, and just seeing what he could do in practice, I didn't want to give him a free pass. So we're going to defend this quite hard into Toa. He goes side by side, and what do we do here? We leave him just enough room on the inside, but I get the upper hand on the outside with the traction, living to fight another day. And I just didn't want him to overtake me and then get the DRS on Dominic, because I felt then it would be very hard to reclaim that position later on. during the race. So moving on to the next lap, or the end of that lap, we're not close enough to getting the DRS of Suzu Dominic, and we don't have enough of the ERS either. So I decide not to fight this one going down into turn 1. It's going to be a pretty easy move for Antoine in the end. But the good thing I knew is that I probably drained a lot of his ERS whilst he tried to overtake me. And with this raw speed, I thought this would be a good opportunity for me to just be towed along, hopefully up towards the front 2 again, and re-harvest that ERS. But we do have Ronha close behind, who is also very, very quick here. Coming into, or staying on board into the lap 6. Let's see what happens going into here. Going through the chicane, Anton cuts it. He actually gets a 3-second time penalty because of that. It is very, very easy to get a penalty and a track invalidation round this circuit. But moving on towards the end of lap 8, we're kind of falling into the same scenario of almost dropping out of this DRS zone, and I decide not to use it here because I can't afford to be wasting. I use it last minute, I think, just as I realise I'm outside it, but again, we are about 1,000th away. Caught daydreaming just a little bit here, but we're going to use the rest of it down this straight, and I think Ron Hart isn't going to make an attack. I'm just making sure I get back within the DRS zone of Antoine and Dominic. As Antoine now overtakes Dominic, Smasher was able to pull out of the DRS zone of both of these guys, so he's got a little bit of clear breathing space, and we just got to hope we can overtake Dominic as soon as possible. As you can see, moving on to lap 11 now, Antoine has actually caught Smasher and got into the lead of this race. Both of them are clear, and right now I wasn't feeling too comfortable. I was feeling a lot of understeer, and just I feel like as the race goes on, that's the stronger I get in a league race. And with this setup I'm using, which is mainly for stability and for straight line speed, as you can see, Dominic doesn't have any straight line speed because he's running very low on the ERS. We were able to overtake him without using too much at all. I knew towards the end of the race, when we're on the soft, that's where I would be at my strongest, when the fuel is lower, when the grip is higher, and when stability and straight line speed and ERS harvesting actually becomes a factor. So we're moving on to lap 12 here. We got past Dominic, and on the exit of Scari, we saw this as an opportunity to try and get away, because as I said before, I wasn't feeling comfortable with my pace here right now. I was actually genuinely struggling a little bit, but I'm just trying to get through the race without any warnings and save it for the last part of the race where I could be a bit more aggressive, because once you get a warning here, it's very, very much on a knife edge for the rest of the race itself. And you can see we've had successfully got out of the DRS zone because Ron Hart was unable to overtake Dominic going into this turn 1. And you can see we've still got a fair amount of the ERS on board, and we've actually started to close in again on the top 2 leaders. But as we come into lap 14, on the exit of this chicane, there is a virtual safety car that has now come out in this race, and that has really thrown a spanner in the works, because from this distance it's actually going to be very touch and go if the soft tyres can do around 12 laps, and you really want to be pitting under a virtual safety car if you can, because everyone else, if you pit, everyone else who stays out is going much slower than they would do at the normal racing speed, which means you don't lose half as much as you would do if they were going the full speed. So we had to take advantage of this. Luckily, it just finished as we entered the pit, so we are still going to gain quite a significant amount through the people who stayed out. The likes of Ronha have actually decided to stay out, but myself, Smasher, and Antoine, and Leopard, and Dominic have all pitted at the same time, and this actually plays into my hands very, very nicely. Because as I said, with the setup I'm using here today, it's really, really good on stability, and at this point of the race, I don't think we had a single warning. And doing 12 laps on the softs is going to be a very, very hard ask. And my strongest asset is definitely tyre management, tyre temp management, and also the harvesting of the ERS. So I'm just going to try and stay as close as I can to these guys and try and catch them out at the end of the race. See, we crossed the line here. Let's see what the gap is. There's a few people pitted. It's 2.5, 2.7 to Smasher. Antoine had 8 seconds of penalties because he sped into the pits, and Smasher has a penalty himself. As we move on to the end of the next lap, you can see he's on 0 ERS as he crosses the line. He does a 20.4. Let's see how much ERS we actually have saved, and we have 70% of the ERS. You can see, just flashing back to the lap times they did, we do a 20.6, only 2 tenths slower, and we have 60% more ERS saved than him. And you can see on the next laps, round Monza, it is so hard for you to save anything, as Antoine does a 20.0, Smasher does a 20.5, and you can see, once again, we haven't used that much ERS. And what are we doing here? We're doing a 20.6, and I can confirm both of these guys up ahead have no ERS to use whatsoever. And I saw by those lap times, I felt like I didn't even need to read my chat because I wasn't reading it at the time. I knew that they were low on the ERS and that they were pushing very hard because both of them had a penalty, and they want to try and put as much distance as possible between themselves and the competition. So I thought to myself, if I can just stay within now 11 seconds of Antoine, which should be very doable, if I can stay within 3 seconds of Smash until the last few laps, that's going to put a huge amount of pressure on him. And I think we're about to stay on board for this entire lap, because this is a perfect example of the way I was using my ERS, because I knew at this stage he was on very low. And I could also tell through the straight line speed that he was also suffering down the straights, which would indicate that he's low on the battery, or he just doesn't have the straight line speed as I do, which also I knew meant that I would have better stability towards the end of the race. So I was really thinking towards those last 3 laps at the start of this stint, and try not to burn out my tyres too early, so I'd have better tyre life and all the power I would need to put myself back in this race. So you can see the gap is about 5.4 seconds to Antoine, 2.9 to Smasher. So we are just really dangling that bait on the thread, was my analogy that I was thinking of at the time. Just keep him within that gap. Don't let him extend it, but just keep him right on the cusp of that 3 seconds, and then attack once he is vulnerable at the end of the race. So you can see we're not really using much of the ERS at all. There is no point to use it right now. There's no point showing the cards I have available to me. So I'm going to save it all towards the end of this race, and it's just working out absolutely perfectly. I'm just not getting any track limit warnings. I knew Smasher had more downforce. I know that they would be taking more risks, because obviously you can see that with the penalties they got. I'm just taking it not easy, but just making sure I'm very consistent and driving within the limits. As you can see, Smasher is still on 0% ERS at this stage. As we enter lap 25, he's trying to get on terms with Antoine to get in that DRS zone to drag him along. But on the exit of this corner, he uses the overtake button and he makes a huge mistake. And you can hear the frustration he's about to say now.
Race over. GG's, what a stupid mistake to make.
And that was a huge mistake to make, because you can see by the delta in his screen, you can see how much he's attacking these curbs. That's a very big risk around Monza. You can gain a lot of time by cutting the corners, but there's a very high risk that you're going to be punished for it as well. As my mentality going into this race was to make sure I don't get a warning and try and save any warnings that I would need to use towards the end of the race. And you can see, compared to Smasher, we are much more within the limits, driving it much cleaner, looking after our tyres well, keeping all the ERS in hand, and we have actually started to close in on them regardless, because I felt like they were pushing a bit too hard of these tyres, because they're only really designed to be pushed for 8 to 10 laps at max at a good speed. On the last couple of laps, they are going to be not in puncture territory, but they're going to be in a very difficult pace, as I think we're going to stay on board for the rest of this race now. And as you can see, the indicator has now in fact actually just come on. It comes on at 60% when you're on the soft tyres, and you can see over the course of this stint, despite them being more aggressive at the track and pushing very hard on every single corner, as a result of us just being patient and just looking after our tyres, looking after the ERS, because not only because of the setup, but mainly because the battery is so low on the straights, they're just losing so much speed. We are actually closing in on them regardless at this point. Even without that mistake from Smasher, I felt like we had enough weaponry to attack if we needed to do it. And right here now, I was just making sure that I keep it clean, I keep it on the track, and also making sure that Ronhard doesn't get within a second of us, just in case he puts up an unnecessary battle on the last lap. So I'm saving, still got 50% of the ERS to use here, and you can see by the delta that how quickly that time is coming down front. I think Antoine has really burnt out his tyres due to the amount of penalties he has. He's just pushing so hard, and I think Smasher was just pushing so hard to try and get out of my 3 seconds that he has ended up really burning his tyres out. And I think we just pushed at the right time and just really executed this last stint almost to perfection. I think at the start of the race we were definitely struggling, but I don't really like to change the balance of the car. I really like to keep it on the same wing, the same brake pressure as well. I just want to keep it consistent, and just through our patience and just keeping it clean in our driving style, and also with track limits in the ERS, we have brought ourselves back into this race. But it is not over yet. We still have 1 lap to go. Ronhard is almost approaching that 1 second mark, but you can see the gap. We've closed in so quickly on Antoine. I feel we've been the quicker car in this last stint. I think it's only Ronhard who has been quicker than us, but that's due to him having 2 lap fresher tyres. It just shows sometimes that you do not need to be the fastest. You just need to arguably be the smartest driver in the field, knowing when to push, knowing when to abuse the limits with the engine, the track, the ERS, knowing when to save everything for the right time. It is working out absolutely perfectly, as now we have only 1 corner to go now. We have almost a 7/10 buffer that we would need to blow for not to win this race. So as we enter Parabolica, we've used all our ERS, we've used the fuel very effectively here, and cue headphone users. You can see how happy I am as we now cross the line.
Come on, gas! Gas!
And you can see very happy of that.
Fucking there!
And it has been a while. It has been since TSRL finale at Abu Dhabi, since we had won a race.
Oh, that feels so good again.
A lot of my league races recently have been very up and down. But as I said before, I felt like we've had the potential. We've had the speed, I think for sure, but we just haven't put it together. Haven't been close to what I could have potentially put together. And you may say in this race that you only win because you don't get penalties. But the one thing I will respond with again is that it's very hard to be fast without getting a penalty. And arguably, the people ahead were faster at times because they were being more aggressive with the track limits and with the battery power. And it just shows sometimes it's not about the pure speed. It's just about developing, just executing the right strategy of knowing what to do at what points during the race. And at the end of the day, our consistency and race management, particularly in that second stint, is what has won this race, and that has brought us right back into this championship fight for TSRL. So I really hope you enjoyed that. LCR Leopard, in fact, came home 7th that race, so he has lost a lot of points. However, his 3-second penalty has been removed at this stage due to the stewards deeming that one of his warnings was unfair. However, there is a stewards inquiry still going on about that, but regardless, we have brought ourselves right back in here, and it feels good to definitely be on the top step of the podium once again. So I really hope you enjoyed that race. For me personally, it was a very intense one, a very tactical one. Although sometimes it may look like I'm not driving fast, I'm usually looking ahead quite further into the race rather than just a corner ahead. I'm usually looking about 10 laps ahead at times, which sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. But on this occasion, it definitely did. So thank you so much for the support of my channel. Make sure you check out BOTB down below in the link for their competition. Many thanks for them for supporting this video, and I will catch you for TSRL Canada, which goes live tomorrow night. Thank you so much, and peace.